Good morning, Africa. Welcome to Open Your Door, a business series and a platform we have opened up to discuss topical issues on the continent. The dogmas of the past are no longer adequate for this stormy present. The situation is piled high with occasion. We have to think and act anew. As Africa makes its move towards Africa Rising and Africa Renaissance, I think we do not talk enough among ourselves. I don't think we interrogate issues enough. And we wanted to bring perspectives to some of the issues that are bedeviling us, because it's not okay for a rich country where the cradle of civilization began to still be dealing with some of these challenges in 2021. I have brought in some intellectuals in the room to be able to discuss some of the things we have been talking about offline and bringing them online to you. I know that these voices will add weight to some of the issues that we need to talk about, and we want to address the elephants in the room. We want to be daring. We want to talk about the things that concern us. And this is a great opportunity for all of you to be able to rally behind this so that we make sure that the renaissance for our continent becomes a reality. And I'm joined by colleagues and intellectuals. Shamim, we met and we spoke when you had just come back from London, and we had a great conversation. And I thought perhaps these are conversations we need to bring to the fore. Do you mind telling us which perspective you bring to the table as we start?
Well, to start with, thank you so much. I am glad to be on Africa Rising. The perspective I bring is anthropological. I'm an anthropologist by profession. And what I intend to bring on the show is diversity of thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Shamim. I have Terence Chambati as well to weigh in. So what do you bring to the table? We're talking about a big issue here, Africa Rising. And what perspective are people going to hear from you throughout this series?
Thank you, Elton. And what I like about this conversation is we are breaking down the complexity of discussions. I think we overcomplicate things, and we find ourselves in a system of complex issues. So I'm a systems change agent, and through that I like to bring about sustainability conversations and think about beyond tomorrow. Just there's more beyond tomorrow, and as Africa, I think we're a bit too short-sighted. We're always thinking about tomorrow. So with these conversations, I hope all of us can start talking and thinking beyond tomorrow.
Great stuff. And I know hopefully the optimism is not lost, the hope is not lost in terms of what Africa can bring to the table. And we are starting this series where there are lots of lockdowns across the continent. You've been hearing the news in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, Zambia. We've got a youthful population that's disenfranchised, that's malcontented. And we have issues to talk about. And today we thought, to break ice, we decided we talk about Africa Rising. How are we doing in terms of the journey of scaling up the continent? Because what lies on my heart as a scaling up advisor is, can we re-educate? Can we scale up the continent? Can we talk about economic prosperity and abundance and self-reliance? Because wherever you go and whenever you see the news being covered, it's always issues of malnutrition, children not in school, governments borrowing money from multilateral institutions and donors, the whole vaccine story, we want to talk about that. Can't we make our own vaccine? What's really going on here? Are we on some unknown drug? And today we want to talk about Africa Rising. And what do I mean by that? Are we leading the charge in terms of driving our continent forward? What is this thing all about? Do you think we are on the right trajectory? Are we on the right course, you think? I'm opening up the floor now. Let's talk the way we talk.
So people talk about the African Renaissance, and Africa Rising is probably linked with that. Renaissance, have we been plateauing all this time? People talk about Africa having so much potential. And I think it's worthy of having this conversation now, where what's stopping us from bubbling up? What's stopping us from jumping on that trampoline and showing the world who we are? We are endowed with resources, minerals, arable land, but we still seem to play second fiddle to the rest of the world. So that's where our challenges are. And I think when we start seeing past our challenges, we begin to prosper and flourish.
But remember that Africa comes from a difficult place, and I don't want to give an excuse of history.
Yeah.
In reading Meredith's book around the 5,000-year history of Africa, he actually calls Africa has an embarrassment of resources: gold, platinum, diamond, you call it, all sorts. Within any village or any hamlet, you will find that there are resources. And discoveries are being made. So you have got a dividend in terms of latent wealth. I'm told in Congo, the cobalt resources, the gold resources, the forests alone. But when you look at the potential versus the way, the standards of living, there's a parity there. There's a gap. You come to Uganda, you go to Zimbabwe. It's the same story. And I'm thinking, now that 2020 happened and COVID happened, maybe this is a necessary evil. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. How do we charge forward? Because I know that there's 70% arable land on the continent, which means we can grow and feed the world. I know we have a youthful population, and all of them, people are being born every day, and people are being thrown into the job market. You are an anthropologist. What's going on? Are we on some unknown drug, Shamim?
Well, the interesting bit about what you all just said is the story that is being told about Africa, right? So my question is, who is telling this story?
Good.
My experience in Europe, walking to my school at London School of Economics, on the platform, on the train, seeing lots of different organizations that are collaborators of Africa, asking for money, charity money, to help the malnutrition kids, to help in education, sanitation. I ask my question, who is telling our story?
Yeah.
And what really breaks my heart in that is we have let other people tell our story, and which I think it has to change. Because
you're right.
Having a conversation with someone telling me, oh yes, I'm going to Africa to help out. My question is, how are you helping out? Question still comes to us, who is telling our story? Because every time someone else tells our story, I don't think they say the right story. And so what I am challenging us to do is we all have a responsibility to tell the story about our continent, right? Because when we tell our story, we are emotional about it. We are being vulnerable about what's important. Letting other people tell our story is blocking us from shifting the mindset of what we have to do in terms of pushing the Rise Africa agenda.
Maybe the voiceless don't have a voice, Shamim. How do we do this? And I hear your point in your submission. BBC would come in, CNN would come in. Now we have CGTN, the China mouthpiece. And I remember asking my journalist friends, where is the African news or a strong brand that tells our story from our vantage point? And I remember Akon came to Uganda sometime, and you were saying the challenge we have besides marketing is that we don't tell our story. So I don't have a voice. I'm just a mere mortal. How do I start speaking?
But guys, we've got many friends who've gone through journalism school, mass media, and you name it, communication specialists across the continent. Yet we are still, I think what we are seeing is more of them are becoming reporters of what's going on and not actually really curating and creating stories which reflect Africa on a positive note.
Because you, my friend, as an intellectual, you have shaped me in a certain form. Grow up, Elton, go to school, get a job, go in your little corner, keep quiet, and don't disturb the news. And remember bringing Steve Jobs here to say, when you grow up, you get told you get to live like this. This is your box. Don't tinker with the world too much. He says for him, he actually went and he took the road less traveled. And so how does one begin how do I tell a story? I'm a mere mortal on the African continent. I'm just one out of billions. How can we begin to do that? Do you believe that's the starting point? To say, guys, we're not like this. We're not malnourished. We're actually a rich continent.
Well, we need to be interested for starters. I was telling you my experience at LSE in my international development class. In our seminar sessions, one of the things that really broke my heart so much, and I remember doing a presentation about DR Congo and the experience and asking people to show, almost everyone in my class had an Apple, a MacBook. And I had to show to the class what it means for for us to have our MacBooks and iPhones and what that means for DR Congo. And so it came from a place of frustration, but a place of love and belonging, because I am a person born on, a child born and bred on African continent. So what it means for us to get interested is, yes, we're Africans, we are off to Europe, and then we forget. So we talk about what really upsets us about Africa, but what do we do about what upsets us about Africa? So no one is going to come to clean our house. We've got to clean it ourselves. And that's what I say in terms of let's get interested.
But there's a problem of ego, Shamim. We've got egos, we've got the whole thing where we know everything. We don't want to be told that we don't know anything. And it presents a challenge. I think the starting point, we just need to put a pause and start unlearning things. There's a lot of things we need to unlearn and learn before we start learning and relearning.
And I love the fact that you're bringing that point, because that's really the firmament of open your door to say, when you come, or when I come and I bring in a different voice in your business or in your country, to say, open your door, be vulnerable, and human-centered, to say, I don't know it all. Let me listen to new voices, because I think we thrive from multiple perspectives. Now, in telling my story, I'm a young man, I'm told I have to respect elders. But how do I bring my discourse to the table? That's the challenge that we're facing. Even before we start saying, topically, industry by industry, how do we solve it? Just being able to talk to TC if he's my boss. How do I even knock the door and get in? If it's a president of a country and I differ with a point of view, how do I begin to do that? Africa has got rank and file. There's a lot of class. And beginning to even break that down is a war in itself. So people then say, you know what? Let me go to Canada. Let me go to London. I'm not coming back, and I'm comfortable. As long as my family and I are comfortable, I'm good to go. Yeah.
But when you do that, you're closing the door, which is why we're saying when you open your door, you become vulnerable. You're letting people in to your space. From a systems thinking point of view, don't forget everything is connected. We are all connected, which is why when we look at our African heritage of the extended families, we are all related. At the end of the day, you move from Zimbabwe to Uganda to Tanzania, you find someone who you are close to or linked to somehow. We are related. We are all connected as human beings, for starters, and with the universe. So that interaction and interdependence of the universe as human beings is important for us to understand and know that the moment you're closing the door, you are shutting down yourself within your own space. And now not forgetting that you're closing that door, your interaction will impact those outside of the door.
And so for me, as I have learned and served companies in this scaling up advisory space, as I have prepared and learned, one thing that's happening is that I've been humbled by the things I'm learning. What I know and what I don't know, it's like night and day. And we have got our leaders in government, our leaders in these multinational corporations. Where do you even begin to tell them how can they be vulnerable? Because what has made them survive and thrive are those positions. And you're saying now, as we're moving towards abundance, it's no longer adequate for your intellectual capacity alone. You need to open the door and allow that collective intelligence. And I'm speaking Zambezi to Limpopo, guys. I'm speaking Cairo to Cape Town. How do you start that conversation with the president or with the head of a country or a company? We have experienced this in our engagements, and how do we begin to break that ice?
Okay, so the first thing is, as Africa, we do have a culture or cultures, right? So from an anthropological perspective, culture is embedded in our living. The way we live every day, we live it every day. And so when you speak about how do we break the ceiling to engage, to have those conversations that bring everybody on the table, irrespective of age, language, or where you tribe, right? We bring culture to the center space and letting people understand that we are not saying culture is not important because we live it every day. We are saying that culture is dynamic. It's not static. Culture evolves. It changes with the times. We are currently dealing with a very big problem, which is a global problem. Yep. We all didn't know about this some time ago, that it will happen. But we are evolving and shedding off skin and then making ourselves better in that process. We are learning as we go along. So we start with the phrase of we actually know nothing. Let's seek to understand things, learn from each other, embrace change, listen to those unheard voices.
Are we an egoistic bunch?
Yes, we are. But it brings about something else where they talk about disrupt or be disrupted. And I think the world over, this is what has happened to us. Not just from an African perspective, this is a world issue. And I think as Africans, as an African, we seem to feel it more because we are now looking for the blame game. Whose fault is it? Who's caused this for us? And you name it. But guys, disruption is happening on a daily basis. Change is the only constant. So the moment you embrace that, you start changing. So I think that's what we need to do from an African perspective. Accept that change is the only constant. Disrupt or be disrupted.
And you know, talking about the resource dividend that we have, I think in terms of minerals and land holdings, Africa leads the pack. But you then find out that we do not have a huge chunk of the value chain. Now, yes, I'm telling my story. Yes, I'm being vulnerable. But where do we even start? Because the problems are many. Could there be a lead domino? Is it just talking among ourselves? Is that going to start us on that journey? To say, you think a leader is going to say, you know what, I was wrong. That's very difficult to do. There are many challenges, your corruption, your governance. What do you think about leadership? And I'm introducing leadership from the perspective of governance, but more importantly, from a self-leadership point of view. That everyone is a leader, because whenever I have conversations, when I move around and I ask somebody, how are you doing? Things are bad, or the government is not taking care of us. It's not the role of government to take care of you. It's the role of government to set up an enabling environment. So when you meet someone, a young man starting out, I've not gotten the benefit of education, maybe I'm out of employment, COVID has exacerbated the whole story. How do you encourage, from an anthropological point of view, I'm learning this word.
You said it right.
The anthropological view to say, how do you even start? Is self-leadership part of that, where we start from an individual unit and then the groupings come, whether it's a company, whether it's an association, because the disconnect is crazy. Resources on the one hand, poor people on the other hand. That connection looks like there's a disconnect. What are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts exactly are, from an anthropological perspective, we are studying people through culture, right? And we've already established that culture is something that we live every day. And so that means in terms of our perceptions, in terms of our values, our beliefs, we need to shift our mindset. You talked about something very important as education. And I know I always question people that we are part of the global agenda. But how much is the portion that we actually, what is the part we play in contributing to that global agenda? So I'm very obsessed with SDGs, and I'm obsessed with quality education. And what I pose to us is, what do we refer to as quality education? Because I think we've got to misunderstand what that is. The fact that you've not gone through mainstream education as we know it does not mean that you are not educated. Any moment, we start from a place of saying we know nothing. And any moment I engage with you or the audience, I am learning something. That is how we can turn that into quality. How do we make it quality? So we take in what speaks to us, that is going to drive the agenda forward, and then leave what doesn't benefit us. So the same applies to our leaders. We can't keep saying the government has not done this. What have you done to help the government on that journey? Because we have a civic responsibility, right? If we say the government hasn't built infrastructure, for example, roads, for example, and then tomorrow you are the same person trespassing on the pedestrian walk, what is your role that you're playing as an African person?
It's also true that the public goods have to be provided by government. When you look around, when you move around on the streets, the issue of infrastructure, whether it's soft or hard, the issue of health, the issue of education, do you think government has directed resources enough, at least to get us started on the journey? Because like I told you, I'm a young man. I know nothing. How do I even start a conversation with my member of parliament or my local chairman, for instance? It's yes. So, in terms of not apportioning blame to the leadership, how do I also balance the fact that the government or the leadership has a role to play in nation building, in economic advancement? It's mission critical.
So I think how we approach some of these things is where the problem starts. We want to change things. We want to go into systems and change them. You cannot change a system, but you can influence a system. So by you getting involved in a particular system, you then get to understand the root cause of what's happening within that system, why there's that cause and effect, understand the feedback loops happening within that system. Once you understand that, then you'll understand, if I do this, what are my skill sets? What can I do as Terence? If I'm able to contribute this A, B, C, D to this challenge in my neighborhood, at my office, in my department, this is what I can change. This is what I can contribute, And my contribution will lead to change.
And in systems thinking, you're then saying there's systems of systems. So in your small sphere, you can start there. Whether it's in your neighborhood or in your small startup or business. And you start from there and you build critical mass. Whether the system at a global level is working well or not, that's another thing. And I think that's really powerful, because the whole issue of vaccines, and I think we cannot ignore that. The envoy for Africa was complaining that we were disenfranchised in terms of the value chain, in terms of vaccines, that Africa was given breadcrumbs and right at the end of the queue, that the reality is by even 2022, we might not even be able to immunize or vaccinate half of our population. Yet out there, they're already enjoying a game of football and moving around, not knowing what other variants are coming our way, this COVID thing. So what do we do? Because it's always then Europe, America, or you put us into this situation, you colonized us, keep providing us these things, give us donations, and we're still receiving donations at this hour. But you lie down on the road and let's see whether a beautiful BMW or a Mercedes won't run you over. Is it an issue of priorities? Are we missing something when we start looking at possible solutions to at least get the lead domino going? The issue of telling our story, powerful, taking ownership as an individual and starting that influence in your system. What do you think the whole issue of vaccines? Can we like park there a little bit and say how do we deal with this issue of vaccines vis-a-vis local solutions as well that are emerging across the continent, because we are locked up, we're not able to function fully, and this might continue for a while.
So my question still will be, what lessons are we learning from history? All right.
Important.
We've had, I did a research on the politics of vaccination in Uganda. And part of what I realized is we are actually not paying attention to the dynamics. Because if you think about vaccination, there was a time when they were vaccinating kids against polio. And the results of that, the perceptions amongst people within communities. We've heard about stories of vaccine trials of people in the minority setting. So that's if you live in America or Europe, you are termed a minority. So you're in that box. We've heard about those vaccine trials. Now we're at a stage where we are facing a global pandemic and we need a rescue. We can't keep closing the country. It's bad for business. We've got to learn how to live with this, situation. And so my question is, if we keep crying about we've been disenfranchised, we are seen as republics, we are standing on our own. And so we need to do something, right? We can't do the same thing expecting different results.
True.
So my first question is, as we think about how we innovate to structure our priorities as countries within Africa, we need to think about the relationships that we are creating outside of our borders. So some of these things do not come out of, they've just happened. They are representative of something deeper.
True.
And as civilians, as citizens of the different countries we come from, we might never get to understand these dynamics. But we are posing a question to our leaders. the kind of relationship that we are creating outside our borders, how fruitful are they? Do they benefit us, or are they just there for the sake of being just there? Right?
So Mimi, you mentioned something about SDGs earlier on, and it's related to what you're talking about right now, where I think the whole ethos around SDGs is leave no one behind.
Yeah.
All 17 SDGs are important. You can't pick one or concentrate on one or two and leave the others.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of bringing all 17 together and saying, by doing or working on zero hunger and working on good working environments, what's the opportunity cost for working with the other one? That brought together issue of education and quality of education. We tend to measure quality of education by literacy levels.
Yeah.
I know people will say fighting Zimbabwe, fighting, we've got the highest literacy level. Uganda will come in, we are better than you. Egypt will say we've also got high literacy levels. Do you think that this is bringing about the challenges we have today, the complexities we are having today around the vaccine issue, which Elton is talking about, understanding what a virus does, how it mutates and how it grows and how it spreads, because we can do all these things. It's the conditions which you set. It's not the flu which hits you. It's the conditions which you allow the flu to hit you. That's how you get infected. So,
and my worry is that this is one challenge that has hit us, and there are many headwinds that are coming.
Absolutely.
I remember, I think, Bill Gates saying this is just the beginning of many pandemics that are going to hit the world. Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, talked about seasons like this. Harvard is now propagating this whole VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I don't think the world is going to get any better or any good in terms of we want it to be like it was in the back. But the thing is, do you believe that African governments are tapping into the collective intelligence of their people? Because I move around in Uganda, I go to Kenya, I go to South Africa. You speak to these young people, resilient, vibrant, intelligent, and they bring amazing discourse to the table. And this is one of the reasons why we're saying, open your door, let's be vulnerable, I know nothing. Do you feel that the government establishment and the leadership is opening up its door enough to citizens to bring in their contributions? Whether through a platform, social platforms, or whatever way, could be easier to say, wow, I think this is a good idea. I think this is a good idea. Because it's no longer adequate to just say, this is what we're doing as an individual.
Yes. I will be brave enough to say, no, we are not doing enough. And we must do something about it. I know of a country within African borders that is actually tapping into this potential. Because guys, things change, right? As we can't be the same every day and forever. We must move with the changes. Our external environment is changing, and so our leaders have to be drawn to that attention of that change. So how do you keep stability while the external environment is actually changing? And it's having these conversations and bringing them on the center space. We do have amazing epidemiologists across Africa.
Yeah,
do we have a platform where they actually meet to talk about these issues? And so there has to be leadership will for these things to happen. Yeah. If our leaders are not willing to come together and say, hey, we've got this problem, and you can't keep seeking for help outside. We've heard of this saying of charity begins at home, all right? You can't always be seeking people outside of your borders to actually help you about your problems. You need to start somewhere, and then someone will say, hey, I've noticed you doing A, B, C, and D. How can I help? So I think leadership will is very, very important in this perspective to tap into the new potential that we have, right? We've got a huge flow of our talent across Europe, America. How many of our leaders are actually keeping track of this talent? Because this talent is not actually serving your government.
And they're advancing as well.
Absolutely.
They are, though. They send remittances back to Africa. We receive billions from you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I'm looking at that in a perspective of let's tap into this knowledge. Yep. Be able to share it. Because, we keep talking about literacy levels, but this is literacy, guys. We're tapping into experiences, into knowledge that has been earned elsewhere, that someone has paid billions of dollars for, right? And so let's learn from each other and see how we can collectively pull our knowledge and wisdom together and say, hey, yes, we know nothing, but we are learning something from each other. And we're opening our doors
Yep.
to learn more, to learning more.
So in terms of this whole issue of opening our doors, I don't think it's the literal sense of opening your door.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone has been able to pick that. But are we saying our leaders' doors are closed? From a business perspective, from a country perspective, local government perspectives, are we saying that these doors are currently closed? If they are, how do we start opening these doors?
Yo, they are closed in two ways. The mindset, obviously.
Yeah.
A mind that is closed, and I'm not saying other people are not open-minded, but it's closed. Then secondly is the system. To say, if you want to meet the president of a country, how do you even begin? If you want to meet a government minister or even a permanent secretary, the gatekeepers and the hoops you have to go. And then the third, if I should add, the whole aspect of technology. To say, if you want to reach me, call me on Zoom, call me on Google Meet. Reach out to me on email, but don't take a month without responding. I remember going to some ministry and we're putting in our proposal. As I walked into this office, I discovered that the whole table was filled with proposals other people had brought. And I was like, how do I even remember or know that this proposal is going to be read? It's also how information is going to flow.
Yeah.
And that was the agricultural ministry. And we're putting in a proposal, and I was like, how do I know that this is going to be read? So I remember the proposal, 2-ply. So you take one to the, they call it a registry, where they register your thing and they say, I will get back to you.
Yeah.
They never got back to us. Anyway, I want to hold that point, and when we come back, we want to just dive into the whole aspect of the agricultural transformation that could be possible for us.
True.